Hey guys, thank you for tuning into this video. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Brennan Maynard. I am a professional whitetail habitat consultant and land manager based out of the Northeast. And today I have an exciting video to bring you. This is a client property that I did a consultation on a couple months back here this spring. And we've come into this property and we've done a turnkey process here, set up this landscape, put in travel corridors, bedding areas, mock scrapes. We're going to be doing tree stands here in the future. This property is now ready to hunt. We've taken these key locations in and throughout this landscape and we've maximized the amount of deer travel that's going to be going through these key locations. Right now I'm standing in probably my favorite spot across this entire landscape, and as I'm going through these different locations, showing you these different improvements that we've done, I want to go ahead and show you the map as well, so that way you can get the overall picture. You know, how is everything on this property connecting? Because anytime that you're setting up a whitetail parcel, every single improvement needs to connect to the next improvement. You should never just go out there with no plan, no overall picture of the entire landscape and start doing improvements, because at the end of the day, it's going to be broken up. It's not going to work as efficiently as if you went in with a game plan. So again, I'm standing in one of my favorite locations, and the reason it's one of my favorite locations is because it was already a hot spot. We have multiple terrain features leading into this one location right here. Behind me, this entire hillside here was loaded with scrapes. The amount of deer travel that came through here, the amount of deer runs was incredible. So what I've come in and done, number one, there's going to be a stand location right up directly behind the camera location. I've got a water hole here where all of these travel corridors meet. We've got a mock scrape over to my left, another natural branch I assume a scrape will be under. And we've now jam-packed all of these travel corridors, and I'll show you some videos of these travel corridors. I've come in here with a forestry mulcher and made a visible trail. Anytime you're making a travel corridor, it's very, very simple. Make a trail that is visible and then add in side cover. It's as simple as that. Make it so the deer are enticed to travel that trail. Whenever I'm creating a travel corridor, number one, going in, creating that trail, path of least resistance, and then I'm hinge cutting trees most often perpendicular to that trail. And the reason I choose perpendicular is because that perpendicular lines that you're going to have, those horizontal lines from laying those trees down, that impedes the deer's vision to the left and right of that trail. It makes that trail visually enticing. At the end of the day, it adds side cover, it makes it visually enticing, and it's going to make that travel corridor be used more often here in the future. So by putting in this water hole, again, leading the deer out of this location, this spot is absolutely going to produce a lot of deer activity, and I am going to predict that this is where they're going to kill their mature buck here on this property. We'll see if I'm right here in the future years. Now, another thing I do want to point out about these travel corridors, and I will show you again some videos of them. A travel corridor, to me, it doesn't necessarily mean one specific trail. Again, a corridor could be several trails in one specific location, or within 10, 15, 20 yards of one another. They doesn't necessarily have to be just one trail. The main thing when you're doing these travel corridors is make sure that all of those trails lead and persuade deer to one specific location in front of your stand location. So I'm standing right now in one spot, stand location up behind the camera like I explained earlier. We go another 300 yards to my right over here, and there's going to be another stand location. Okay, what we have is several trails going along this hillside with the terrain features. Another key point, make sure it feels natural, looks natural, goes with the terrain across the landscape. At the end of the day, don't make a deer climb up a mountain. Will they? Maybe. But why would you do that? It doesn't feel natural. Make it look natural, feel natural. But anyways, we've got several trails going in and throughout this landscape. They all weave in and throughout this woodlot. But the main thing is they all then persuade and lead them back towards these key locations. If you can imagine, this is like a football shape. We're at the point of the football, we're at the end of the football. These trails go in and throughout, they get wider in the center, and then they all pinch back down towards another key location. So I've come in here, I've first of all, I've marked the spots that are absolutely going to produce deer movement naturally. I then picked out the ones that we can hunt efficiently without ruining the rest of the property and having minimal disturbance across the landscape. Then I've come up with ways to manipulate that movement and force them into these areas. I'm going to show you several other locations where we use barricades across the landscape to suppress deer movement in one location and encourage it in another. So let's travel in and throughout this property, show you some of these improvements. And I'm really excited about this property. I'm super excited for this client. I'm grateful that he had me out here and done this transformation. Again, you know, we did this in 3 weeks, where the average landowner, not because they don't have the intelligence or the means to do it, they just at the end of the day don't have the time. You know, this is could have been a 5-year project at least for this client. And we've come in here 3 weeks and we have implemented the plan, and it turned out really, really great. And I'm excited for the future. So now we're at the opposite end of the football, okay? We were just out there over at the other end where all those trails intersect at that one point, and now this is the other end of those travel corridors where they all lead and persuade deer to this one location. We've got a water hole here. We've got a mock scrape behind me that I've buried a post. I've given them several options to add in a real branch. There's so many different ways that you can go about building a mock scrape. I prefer something that's natural, something that's actually real, like a branch. I've had good luck with vines in the past. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can build them. The main thing is make it so it's directly over that travel corridor where the deer are going to actually be traveling. Make it so they have to hit it, not so that it's inconvenient and they have to get off to the side of it. Also, make it so it stands out. As you can see here, this stands out like a sore thumb. That's what I want it to be like. I want this to be the only branch that's overhanging and convenient for them to hit. Not saying you can't have overhanging limbs on your travel corridor. That's not what I'm saying at all. I actually have changed my theory on this over the years, especially on smaller parcels. I would rather have several scrapes, natural scrapes in and throughout that property, because every time a deer stops and has to hit a scrape, that's more time that they're spending on your property. The last thing I want to do is go cut all those down and have them just zipping through those travel corridors without stopping and taking more time and consuming more daylight hours that they have throughout the day. I want them to be utilizing our property as much as possible. So I think that several natural scrapes are okay. I'm completely fine with that. And then we have those mock scrapes in our key locations where all those travel corridors meet directly adjacent to a stand location. So the stand location here is going to be directly up over my shoulder here. Easy access from the back side of the property. This is most likely going to be a morning stand location. The reasoning for this is because in order to travel to this location, if you were to hunt in the evening hours, there's a very, very good chance you're going to be bumping a lot of deer, because you have to travel a long ways through the woods, past a lot of bedding areas, and the last thing I want to do is be bumping those deer out. So I would rather sneak in from the top side around those bedding areas in the morning. Our destination food plots are out to my left, and another 100, 150 yards over in that direction, and we're going to be catching that deer movement coming off of those fields back out to these bedding areas that we've created. Another travel corridor leading down this hillside here, going directly to that stand, or directly out to that destination food plot. So we've given them a path of least resistance. We've allowed them to access up this hillside here, hit this water hole, and then travel in and throughout this property. So we've done a lot of stuff to this property. I'm going to take you back up now into the bedding areas, show you some of those and how we've created them and how you can create them on your property too. So right now I'm standing in one of the small bedding pockets that I cut in along this ridge top here. And whenever you're putting in bedding areas, there's so many different ways to go about it. There's so many different tactics that you can use. The main thing that you need to understand is, number one, actually find that specific location where you can imagine a deer's bedding. So in this example, just to my left here is the top of a ridge that overlooks this side hill. That is where I intend on deer to be bedding. Now, what I want to do to encourage more bedding in this location is I want to give them adjacent security cover. So I've come up off the top of the ridge, I've cut in a small pocket here, and they're clustered in and throughout this hillside up here. There's several of them, and I'm not impeding their view down the hillside. That's the main thing, and the main key to this is give them a place to bed with a view, add in that adjacent security cover, and it will be utilized. There's so many different ways that you can cut them in, as far as height of hinge cuts, complete cuts, all of that stuff. But the main thing is pick the bed, make sure you're not impeding their view, and add in that adjacent security cover. And it will almost guarantee that that place is going to be used, that bedding area is going to be used here in the future. Now behind the camera, I'm going to show you a location here. Let's take a scan behind here. I have also hinge cut a little bit on this side hill. Now, you might be thinking that that just contradicts what I just previously said, but I've only done it in a few locations, and I've also, if you can imagine, this is almost a barricade down the hillside, kind of runs perpendicular to this ridge top. So I've kind of segmented off this hillside a little bit here, and I still predict deer are either going to bed underneath these hinge cuts or adjacent to them where they can still see down the hillside, still obviously escape up in security cover or down in security cover, whatever they choose, but I've not impeded their view. The last thing that we want to do here, especially because that camera's on a travel corridor right now, I wanted side cover here. The last thing we would want to do for several reasons is hinge cut a bunch of trees parallel with this ridge, because now we have just blocked off their vision down the hillside. Okay, and that's the one downfall to hinge cutting. If you think about this logically, when a deer's bedded down, let's say in a hinge cut bedding area, okay, that horizontal lines that you have across the landscape from those hinge cuts is stopping them from visually seeing any predators moving across the landscape. I still do utilize hinge cuts. All this being said, I still utilize them, but it's important that we're utilizing them in the correct way, because the last thing that we want to do is, again, create a barricade down through here with a bunch of horizontal hinge cuts, horizontal to the landscape, parallel with this ridge top, and now we've just ruined this ridge here for bedding. They've got to be able to visually see. So that is why, in my opinion, natural regeneration, vertical growth, is much more beneficial, because that vertical growth, while deer are laying there, they can still scan and see through that vertical growth and see something moving horizontally across the landscape. If you're using hinge cuts, use them responsibly, understand where deer are actually bedding, how to force them or how to manipulate them to bed in these locations, and you're going to have more success when you think about it, and you don't just go out there and start cutting trees. Right here is a great example of where I would suspect a deer will bed. Most likely they're going to be bedded up on top of this ridge somewhere, and you can see they have a lane right down through here where they could visually see anything that's traveling below them. Again, what I've done is I've hinge cut trees to the left of this and also to the right, but I've still given them an alleyway to be able to see down the hillside. That is the key. And then if you look up behind me, we've got one of our bedding cuts just through this brush over there, and then we've got another larger one over through there. You can see the sunlight coming up through. So plenty of adjacent security cover in here, and I've not ruined this entire hillside by coming in here and doing these cuttings all in and throughout this ridge. You know, if this continued and there was a bunch of these cuttings all in and throughout this ridge, in my opinion, this is going to be used less. I'm not going to say it's not going to be used at all, but it's going to be used less than if we come in here and we do this tactic right here. So in this location right here, this is again another intersection of trails, another multi-dimensional area. There's going to be a stand location directly up to my left, about 20 yards away from this mock scrape that we've put in. This is just an oak branch that we've screwed into a tree, making sure that there is a branch in the location where we want to scrape. Again, that does not mean that these trails don't have another overhanging branch on them. That's not the case at all. All I want to make sure is that the one location that we absolutely need a mock scrape or a scrape to be taking place, there is one available. So again, these trails lead into this location. This entire hillside, we've come in here and we've cut in bedding benches. Literally at the end of the day, all it is a logging road that has been cut into this hillside. And what I've noticed, and as you'll see on other parts of the property, anytime you're dealing with a slope, and especially steep slopes that don't have benches on them, yes, deer will bed on them. They'll find a flat spot, maybe on the top side of a tree to bed on. But at the end of the day, how we can optimize it or almost guarantee that they're going to be using these specific locations is by cutting in a trail or cutting in a bench along them. Okay, so we've cut in, again, several benches, and they all lead to two locations, one up here and one down at the base of this ridge. The other thing that we've done here to optimize this location is over here to my right, I'm standing at the end of a barricade. I've used any trees or debris possible that I had, and I have created a wall from this point about 150 yards down this ridge to another stand location. So what this has done, not only do we have these trails persuading deer to come to this specific location, we're also suppressing deer movement down below me. We're stopping any deer movement taking place across this ridge other than in this location or that location. So any deer bedded on to the left of me that wants to get over to the right of me, that side of the property, has to go in two spots, and they happen to be both in front of stand locations. So that is a tactic I use so often, and the reason I do it is because it works. At the end of the day, they're going to choose the path of least resistance, especially a buck during the rut. They're trying to be efficient, find that doe and estrus. They want to have the path of least resistance, and we have given them that, and we've manipulated them directly in front of our stands. So now we're in a small kill plot that was already existing here across the landscape. We've done a couple different things to this though. Number one, we've added in a travel corridor that the camera is sitting on that leads down to another key location. Again, I'm going to keep reiterating, heavy game plan. These trails don't just lead to nothing. If the deer are going to use them, which they're not going to use them 100% of the time, they're still going to traverse through the landscape. But if we're going to give them a path of least resistance, a path that's easiest for them to take, make sure it leads them towards locations where you want deer to be, or towards locations where you want to persuade deer to move to. So this leads down to another key location. It comes up here towards this kill plot, which then leads off the end of this plot out to their main destination food source. This food plot right here was an active one for the client, but it had a lot of doe activity. And there's several reasons that I believe this. Number one is just the way they were hunting the property. There wasn't enough of the property that was undisturbed to actually hold that mature buck. So we've manipulated their hunting strategy to come in from the backside, because their access, their driveway that leads up to the lodge, which is right in the center of the property, which there is pros and cons to that, which we can talk about. That's something we deal with on our own family farm. And the reason I'm okay with it is because it's a location where deer know that there's common human activity, or very likely that there's going to be human activity. So they're used to it. And at the end of the day, we hear all these big bucks killed in suburban areas. It's possible. It's not the end of the world if your camp location is in the direct center of the property. It gives you a lot more wind opportunity, easy access out to stand locations directly adjacent to that camp location. So don't worry about that. This definitely can be used to your advantage. A property that it doesn't have that, also not a big deal. You can manipulate or set up the property in a way that's going to benefit it most. So anyways, back to what I was saying. Their main access road goes over here to my left. It's only 80, 90 yards through a ravine on the other side of it. So this food plot right here was very exposed to that road. So what we've come in here and done is we planted cedar trees as a screening along this lower side, eastern red cedar, and there's so much hate on this tree. It's quite incredible. At the end of the day, I see people going and clearing mass amounts of acres of cedar trees. In my opinion, I like to see diversity. I'm not saying an entire hillside of cedars is good, because it's absolutely not. At that point in time, it's a monoculture. It's not diversity. I like to see some cedar trees or some sort of thermal protection. And the reason we've chosen eastern red cedar is because this landscape, this property that we're on here, this is in Pennsylvania, and it is extremely, extremely rocky. It's very dry, and eastern red cedar does a very good job of growing and establishing in a location like this. It's very resilient and tends to grow in very difficult soil conditions. So that is why I've chosen this, because it's probably going to do the best compared to other species. All the hate that you hear about these trees and all the negatives about it, don't always read into that. Again, it's all about management. You never want a monoculture of something. Another thing I'm going to show you on this property is a monoculture of invasives: honeysuckle, Japanese barberry, multiflora rose. It is absolutely loaded with invasives. At that point in time, then it becomes an issue. Then we need to go in there and manipulate the habitat and manage it to give it some sort of diversity. Again, a monoculture of anything is not good. It's only going to benefit some species and not all, and most likely it's not going to be benefiting deer. So again, we've put in this screening to block off that road. I want to segment and segregate this kill plot right here. I want to make it feel secluded. So that's going to do that here in several years once those establish. Up here to my right, we've done a lot of bedding area work. It was, again, loaded with some invasives. We've come in, we've cut in travel corridors with a forestry mulcher to, again, manipulate that movement into this kill plot here. And back to changing up their hunting strategy. Before, they kind of dispersed all in and throughout the landscape, as many of my previous clients have done. They really didn't have a hunting strategy that was non-invasive. So what we've done is we've left this entire hillside to my right undisturbed. This is going to be not touched throughout the entire hunting season, and this is the key to this plan. You can have the best property in the world. We could have done all this work in here, created all these travel corridors, bedding areas, and if it's not hunted properly, nothing is going to change. They're not going to see results. Hunting strategy is by far the most important part of any plan. So again, we're sneaking in the backside here rather than traipsing up in and throughout the intended bedding locations and kicking deer out. We want that place to be a safe zone. We want We want the majority of this property to be technically called a sanctuary. We do not want to go in there and disturb it. Be patient, hunt it from the edges, manipulate the deer towards stand locations where you actually can hunt them, and that's how you're going to have a lot more success on your property here in the future. So now we're standing in the bottom corner of their main destination food source. There's going to be a bow stand location, archery or firearm directly up behind the camera location, and we've added in a mock scrape. And what we've done here is we've cut an ironwood tree. We've added in several hole options because this limb right here is not part of this tree. This is an ironwood limb, but this will be replaced, especially before season. I encourage them to do so because I really like a branch that's holding their leaves. And ironwood does a pretty good job. So does beech, so does oak. If you cut off their limb, they tend to hold their leaves. Yes, they will die and become brown, but they tend to hold on to them for a long time. So we'll replace this going into season. And I know there's probably some controversy. Well, you just lost all that scent that was on it. In my opinion, that's not really that big of a deal. As long as it's visual, they're going to go back to using it. And it's really not the end of the world having to replace this, at least from my experience. And I really like something that looks natural, feels natural like this, and I feel like it's going to get a lot of use. And the only reason this is going to get used, and something major to point out here, is this is directly adjacent here to a large open field. Now, why I feel like this is going to be utilized, at least for this year, is because all behind me here, this was no-till corn. This was planted a couple weeks ago. It's already popping up. They did the no-till method on this hillside because it's extremely, extremely steep, and they would have erosion issues if they came in here and plow and disc or run a conventional route. So I'm super happy with what they did here, and I predict great results. It's a method that is a lot more efficient, a lot cheaper, a lot less passes on the field, and it's something I encourage a lot of people to look into. But the reason this is going to be utilized during daylight hours is because of that corn. If this was a wide open field or a different food source, let's say soybeans or something like that was wide open, I would not be hunting this stand location. I would be hunting maybe from that stand location, most likely seeing the deer down over the ridge, at least those mature bucks, staying in security cover down over the ridge. But with that standing corn, that security cover directly adjacent to this mock scrape, I can almost guarantee this is going to get some daylight use here from mature bucks across the landscape. One thing that I would encourage this client to do here in the future is if most likely this cannot be planted in corn every year, or it cannot be planted in corn every year because corn is extremely harsh on the soil. I've done it in the past, planted corn on corn, and it just doesn't really work. It doesn't work very well. You'd have to have a ton of inputs into it, and it's not worth it in my opinion. I would rather see some sort of rotation. So if they plan on doing that in the larger field in the future, what I would do is I'd segment this bottom corner off. I'd make a really small 16th acre food plot here, and I'd put some screening around this to segment this small kill plot from the rest of the field, because at that point in time, now we still have that adjacent security cover, and I predict this is going to be used during those daylight hours. You see it very often. You walk across any sort of field edge, especially during the late October months, and you're going to find scrapes. The issue with those scrapes is that 99% of them are going to be utilized under the cover of darkness, at least by mature bucks. They're not going to be exposed out there, other than if they're in the rut, chasing a doe, you'll see them out in those open areas. But I want security cover directly adjacent to my scrapes, and this location is absolutely going to have that when that corn crop comes up. So we've got a ton of trails coming from this creek bottom, this ravine down in here, up into this stand location. One thing that we can do to this spot here in the future to make it better, especially for archery hunting, is we can add in a fence all along the bottom of this to suppress any deer movement coming in and out of this field in the center, and more pushing them towards the end within shooting distance of our stand. So I've utilized that many times as well. It does work. At the end of the day, it suppresses movement. It doesn't necessarily totally cut it off, but I'm okay with that. If they're escaping a predator, I'm still okay with them jumping over top of it, or if I leave enough room underneath, a fawn being able to crawl underneath it, trying to escape predators. It's again a great tactic we can use, and I think it's something that we're going to implement here in the future as well. So what I want to show you here in this location, this is a steep hillside up here. All that runs a long ways, 300-400 yards in that direction. And again, this is like I was explaining earlier, coming in here and building these bedding benches, what I want to call them, travel corridors, roadways, There's several uses for these, especially in the future, increasing the overall property value because we're making it more accessible for future timber harvest, just to manipulate and maneuver in and throughout the property. Adding in roadways is one of the easiest things you can do to increase the value of your property. Now, these are intended for deer use. We want deer to be traveling along these and bedding along these. And this is the same scenario as I explained earlier. We have trails intersecting a specific location, which is right here in this spot that leads out to what's going to be a little apple orchard once they are mature enough and producing and the fence is taken off of them up this roadway. So again, we've got an intersection of trails. Directly across this creek here, there's another hillside and the road's up on top. There's a logging road that was already existing that runs about halfway up that ridge. Now I wanted to give them a path of least resistance to cut down the hillside. So if I zoom in slightly, you'll be able to see that roadway that we've put in through the leaves that leads directly down to the creek, which then manipulates them all right here in these junction of trails. You know, these trails are on this side of the creek intersecting, and then you've got that one leading down to the creek over there. So this isn't something I really wanted to cross the creek, and you know, there's a bunch of regulations on that. So we've just cut in a trail, stopped short of it. And again, we're just trying to manipulate deer and persuade them to come down in this intersection of trails right here. There will be a stand location in this spot up on this hillside back here. And this is going to be another great potential spot to hunt here in the future because we've put in these trails. So again, like I was explaining earlier, this is the end of the football. So this is the end of the football shape. This is where it pinches down. These go up, get wide in the center, and then they pinch down again in front of another stand location. That's probably my second favorite stand location on the property, which we're gonna go to next. Well, let's travel up in and throughout this roadway, and I wanna show you some of the adjacent security cover and bedding areas that we've cut in adjacent to this travel corridor bedding bench. Now we're about halfway down this lower trail here. Again, there's an upper trail up in there that again leads all the way down where these are going to intersect, where I'm going to take you next. But down below here and in several locations, I've added in small bedding pockets or adjacent security cover. You'll see I've got a couple hinge cuts. That's an ironwood I've hinge cut right in there. And I've just done small pockets in and throughout here to open up the sun or open up the canopy just a little bit more and add in a little bit more regeneration. Our end goal here was to allow them to bed on this trail right here, on this bedding bench, be able to visually see down the hillside, which they can do in several locations, and then we also added in that adjacent security cover. So this is just one way. If you have steep terrain on your property and you want to maximize it, not only for overall investment in the value of your property, but also for the value of deer, adding in benches like this or roads is one of the easiest things you can do. And it's absolutely going to be used, and it's already being utilized by the deer herd. So now let's hop back on the four-wheeler and let's take you over to one of my favorite stands, probably my second favorite stand across this property. So this is another really great stand location because we have, again, multiple trails leading into one location. This entire ridge top right here, and I'll show you what it looks like on the map. This is the top of a ridge. It falls off on both sides. There's a lot of deer runs wrapping around the top of this hillside. So what I wanted to do is, number one, come in and add in these trails. Come in and add these bedding benches to manipulate deer movement into this one key location. Then the second major thing that I did was cut in a barricade from directly to my right, another 200 yards up this ridge that leads to another exit or another trail that leads out towards a food plot that we opened up. So we have manipulated the movement across this landscape, suppressed them from moving over top of this ridge, all in and throughout here, other than in this location and in the other stand location up at the other end of this barricade. So we've added in a water hole, a mock scrape. We've got another trail leading down to the creek, again stops short of the creek, and then there's another one on the other side of that creek that leads up to that other existing logging road. So this is just one of the easiest things that you can do. I've said it many times throughout this video. Find your key location, find your stand location, and figure out a way that you can manipulate that deer movement to concentrate and collect in that one location. Anytime we're hunting, we're trying to be as efficient as possible. Every time we step onto the property, we are having an impact on the deer movement. Every single time we hunt it, we are going to see less and less deer, especially if you're hunting it incorrectly or if you don't have sufficient security cover. There is ways you can set it up to where you can hunt multiple times and not see as much of a detrimental impact, but at the end of the day, we want our specific key locations that are easy to hunt. We want to be packing as much deer activity into them as possible. You're going to see more deer, you're going to have more opportunity, and you're going to have to hunt less to get your target animal. And that's the key, and that's the key to building any whitetail parcel and making it the best that it absolutely can be. So right now I'm standing in a small bedding pocket on the south-facing slope of this property, one of the south-facing slopes on this property. Now this was logged in years past, and because of that logging, obviously the canopy was opened up quite a bit, and there was a serious invasive honeysuckle issue in this area. The entire hillside is overwhelmed by, the majority of it is honeysuckle. Now, as far as cover goes, yes, it was providing cover for this deer herd, but it was not providing high quality food. And as we know, because of research, about 85% of a deer's diet, especially during the fall and winter months, is browse. So if we are not offering browse on our property, we are going to have minimal deer activity, or at least not as much as we could have if we promote some other sort of regeneration and diversity across the landscape. So in this location, we have done several pockets of this size, some slightly larger, some slightly smaller, in and throughout this entire hillside. Now this hillside takes up a good 30 to 40 acres of this property. So we've done several of these locations, and what we've done is we've come in and we've added these eastern red cedar in here. I'm trying to create thermal cover and thermal pockets where deer can bed. Now what we're going to do here in the future is when this starts to establish, these trees start to establish and give us that cover that we're looking for, we are going to then go back in and throughout here and slowly remove this honeysuckle across this landscape. Now this is where a person that's managing strictly for the overall habitat and quality of habitat, and one that wants to hunt it as well, this is where there's going to be a little bit of controversy, because really ideally to remove this honeysuckle, you would want to come in here and do a mass removal. Remove it all across this landscape on this south-facing slope. That would be the best, most efficient way to go about doing it. But after we do that, our cover value just diminished. We have zero cover on this landscape, at least for a couple years as it starts to regenerate. So I would rather, because I know obviously this client wants to have optimal deer movement and a lot of deer utilizing his property, I want to do it in stages, in segments, and slowly transform this hillside into a more diverse landscape. So this is the way that we're doing it. Again, planting these pockets of thermal protection. Once they start to establish, slowly weaning out that honeysuckle across this landscape, and also killing any of it that establishes also in this new pocket that we've opened up, because there will absolutely be honeysuckle repopulating this area. It's all about maintenance, management, coming back in here and tackling it every single year. That is one huge thing that a lot of my clients misunderstand, or a lot of people misunderstand, is having this done to your property is not just a one and done deal. Businesses, any business you look at, you don't just have a business management or a manager of a business come in and manipulate and fix the business and then just leave. No, it's continued support, it's continued manipulation, tweaking things, and that is the same thing with habitat and land management. You build the bulk of it, and then it's tweaking and it's maintaining what you have built. If we left this property alone, in 3 to 4 years, you wouldn't even know we were on it, because these trails need to be maintained, these pockets need to be maintained, and this honeysuckle needs to be tackled here in the future, or else this property is never going to reach its full potential. So now I'm standing down in one of the small kill plots on the south-facing slope, and the reason that we've done this is because there's a large ag field out behind me, and what I'm trying to do is suppress deer from traveling out there during daylight hours. I want to try to hold them on this property as long as possible. So as they're filtering out of their bedding areas along this hillside, I want them to get trapped and consume some of their time here in these food sources before they go ahead and traverse out into that open ag field. So, you know, a lot of people have contradicting thoughts on this. You know, I've got kill plots on this side of the property, and all the way on the other side of the property is our main destination food source. Each property is different. You know, I have different techniques and thought processes around how I would like to set up a property, but each property is different and requires different techniques in implementation. This one, in this circumstance, it made sense to put food sources on this hillside here because, again, the neighbors out there in the ag field, they do hunt as well, and I'm trying to control as much of the daytime movement of the deer herd as possible, especially those of mature bucks. So I want to put in these food sources, and we've got 3 of them about this size scattered along this hillside in key locations, because we're trying to stop, again, that movement from taking place and traveling, having them travel out to those ag fields. I want to hold them here during the daylight and then allow them to go wherever they want during the nighttime hours. So this location, also what I want to point out, we've got a stand location, a blind location in this little peninsula that we've left in this food plot. I've added in, again, some of those eastern red cedar for cover in front of that blind. I've got a mock scrape over my left shoulder here on the point of that peninsula. There's going to be another archery stand over in the left corner of this field. So there's a lot going on here. And the one thing that we need to do here on this lower side is their access road. This access road takes them to another food source up to my left, about another 150 yards. Now, right now, or before we did anything, this was wide open all the way down to that road. There was no screening whatsoever from this food source to that road. Now, what that does is, if they want to hunt that food source over to my left during the evening hours, they have to travel from my right. So they have to travel past this food source in order to get to that one. So when they're traveling in here during the evening hours, getting to their stand location, any deer up on this hillside is going to be watching them come in. So what I have done is I've taken some of the debris from this plot here. I've added in a barricade down below me, and we will also be adding in more screening. We will be doing plantings to add in screening. Most likely, long term, it will be some more cedar trees, again, because the soil is extremely stony, and it does fairly well in these harsh conditions. Another thing that I've done, and this is the controversy between having or hiring a professional whitetail habitat consultant and land manager like myself, and then just hiring any sort of equipment operator to clear you an open space for a food source. Okay, when I'm doing a land management project, so number one, I've come in, I've already done that habitat management plan, designed the property on how I see fit. Now from there, many clients or some clients go get other people to do the work, because at the end of the day, it is a cheaper route to go get somebody else. But the issue with that is they're not absolutely 100% deer focused. I am not only operating the equipment and implementing the work, but I have my head wrapped around how can I optimize this for this client for deer hunting. And at that comes a higher cost. Below me to the right, here's a great example. This is a very small part of many different tweaks I make that most likely another individual that's operating a piece of equipment that just has in their head, let's just make an opening for a food source, they're not going to be thinking of. I left a gateway about 20 yards away from that stand location. Obviously, if they want to hunt that with archery equipment, I want to manipulate deer to travel in and out of that open ag field. If they choose to do so during daylight hours, I want them to do so within shooting range. If I put that gateway all the way at the other end of the food plot, it does nothing for us. So every single thing that I do, whether it's creating the roadways, creating bedding areas, it all has a purpose. It's all with the thought of how can we maximize this for whitetail deer. That is why you can hire somebody else. And there's a lot of great people out there. I don't want to talk bad about anybody. But when you hire me, you can guarantee that I'm 100% going to try to make that as efficient as possible for your deer herd and for your hunting success. So now we're in another kill plot on this south facing slope here, again with the intention to hold up the deer from traveling out to that ag field during daylight hours. We want to try to control as much daylight movement as possible for them. So right in here, again, our access is just down over the hill. We're gonna have a stand location in this tree right here in this small peninsula. And I do want to point out this location because many people looking at this probably would have extended this food source out into this little opening. And the reason I created or left a small buffer is because many times that mature buck does not want to step out in that open area during daylight hours. He wants to be secluded back here off to the side. This was also loaded with scrapes here in years past as I walked this property and scouted it. So we've created this travel corridor that again leads up to another key location, another food source, and then it bends down the hill towards that lower food source that we were just in. So again, multiple trails leading to one location. Our stand location tucked right in there. And again, we've left this secluded. So a mature buck can come down that trail that I just pointed out, walk through security cover down this hillside without ever being exposed to that open food source over there. So that is another great point. Like when you're creating these food sources, don't be afraid to leave a little secluded spot like this. It might be a small opening, but you don't always have to extend the food source into it. I really like to leave an interior trail, is what I call it, an interior buck trail, just off the edge of food sources like this, where they can travel, check that food source for any does and estrus, and they can stay within security cover. That is key. Another thing that I've done, and it's another point, when I'm clearing the debris off of these food sources, if it's not marketable timber, if we're not harvesting it and removing it, I want to be able to utilize that to my advantage. So, because I'm always deer focused, and when you hire me, when this client hired me, he wanted somebody that was 100% deer focused, somebody that's going to think how we can make this property hunt efficiently. I've added in that debris along this bottom edge here, and I've left this small opening off the end of this barricade. This was already a really heavily used deer run down over the hillside. Again, this leads out to that ag field. And look, it's directly right next to our stand location, 25 yards away. If I didn't do that and I added in that barricade and left that opening way down on that end over there, 70, 80 yards away from the stand, that does nothing for us. We always need to be thinking, where's our stand location? How can we get the deer to move by it? If you have that thought process, you can't go wrong. It will be better than just going in with no plan at all. So I've only got 2 more locations to show you. There's several more across this landscape here, but this video would be 3 hours long if I went and explained absolutely every stand location. This location right here, this is where having a camp location in the center of your property makes it beneficial in some circumstances. Just up to my right here at about 20 yards is going to be a stand location overlooking this water hole and mock scrape. 75 yards above that stand location is the edge of their lawn that's obviously around their camp up there. So again, we've got a non-deer area, some area where deer are used to smelling human scent, used to hearing human activity. So that is a non-deer area where we can blow our wind. And again, maybe I didn't say it in this video, but I've said it in many in the past. Each stand location needs a non-deer area on one side of it, or a place or a side of that tree stand where you intend deer won't travel. In this circumstance right here, we've got the lawn directly up behind it. I've also cut in a lot of debris from that stand location all the way up towards that lawn. So again, we're trying to suppress that movement behind that stand location and manipulate them to come down here in front of the stand location. So back to the benefit of having a camp in the center of the property, this spot right here, if that camp didn't exist, would be very difficult to hunt because deer aren't used to a human presence directly in the center of this property. Well, because they are, we can sneak down over the hillside, blow our wind back up this hillside, and now we're being able to get a sneak peek of their daylight movement down here. So let's hop on the four-wheeler, let's head down to our last stand location, which is in another one of those food sources. We've got 3 food sources, again, scattered across the south-facing slope here, 3 kill plots. This trail right here leads directly down to that. From down to my left, we've got that bedding area, which then with a travel corridor leads directly down to that other food source we were just in. It's all connected, it all has a purpose. Come up with that game plan and it's gonna be a lot better. For now, we're in that final food plot, kill plot that we've created here. Stand location will be directly up on the top side here. We have two access options, one directly from camp and one just out here to the right, up in security cover, getting out towards their access road. So we got several options here to access this stand location. And again, that travel corridor that I just rode down right there is not very far, leading up directly to that water hole and that other stand location. Around this corner, I'm going to show you another one of those bedding pockets that we've created. Again, we've opened up these areas with an excavator. We've removed the honeysuckle. We've come in and established eastern red cedar. And we're trying to promote different cover before we remove all of the honeysuckle. So you can see out there in that opening, we've got plenty of cedars planted, getting plenty of sunlight. Going to do very well in these conditions. And then in years in the future, we will slowly remove this honeysuckle to try to promote that diversity. So a lot of great things going on in this property. I'm super excited for this client here in the future. And if he hunts it correctly, it's going to be a killer property for years to come, as long as we maintain what we've created. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this video. I hope when we put all of the mapping videos in with this, you guys can get the overall picture of what's actually taking place on this property, how the design works, how we've picked these key locations, and how we're going to manipulate deer into them and make this property hunt officially for years to come. Again, my name is Brennan Maynard. I'm a professional whitetail habitat consultant and land manager based out of the Northeast. And if you're interested in this, feel free to go ahead and contact me. The number is right down below or on your screen right now. Don't be afraid to reach out. If you have any questions, let me know. We can do this on your property. Every single property that I've ever been on, some have greater potential than the other, but every single one of them can improve. You can do something to it to make it hunt more efficiently, to hold more deer, and have better opportunities at the best bucks in the neighborhood.